This month, I got quite a lot done. In fact, I got more small changes done than probably any other month working on this project. The main thing was the quest system, but I also got a dialogue system in place, made NPCs work properly again, vastly improved controller support, implemented a vector animation system named Lottie, and a bunch of other things, which I'll talk about later. Just have a look at this list if you're curious. Next month, I'm going to try a different approach to work, which I think you might find interesting. So I'll tell you about that at the end of this video. This is a game about exploration and discovery in a procedurally generated world. You find things, collect items, kill monsters, you eventually go and find the gateway, which then allows you to leave and claim all the items you found, and that allows you to level up, progress the story, which of course I'm cooking in my head right now. I can't tell you about it yet though, because it's not done. So, speaking of story, quests. This was the main focus for this month, and just to take the suspense off you, the quest system is pretty much entirely in place. I've even written my very first simple quest line in order to demonstrate it. So largely the system works like this. You have a quest manager, which keeps track of every single quest that the game has available at a time. I've written this in quite a dynamic way, so essentially you would have like a few different quest objects, which would then call into the quest manager to register themselves with it. And they're all ID'd by name and that sort of thing. So the quest manager knows all of the quests that are supported. I've done it in this way because I'd sort of like to keep that flexibility of maybe you don't know which quests are like available at a given time. There might be like DLC content. The main thing that the quest objects actually wrap around is the ability to store data about the current state of the quest. Once you actually sit down and like think about what might be necessary for a quest system, it kind of starts to grow in complexity quite quickly. So you want to do things like serialize all these different flags to a file. I've already got a JSON system that stores all the saved data for that, so I can just shovel it into there. But I want to make this as flexible and just sort of modular as possible. I want to be able to add stuff at a later date without like confusing anything. So the thing is, a lot of these are just going to be Boolean flags, right? True or false, have you spoken to this person or not? And these things can all be packed very nicely into just a big integer. So when you're actually going through and constructing your quest, what you first have to do is initialize it with a bunch of values. So they would tell you things like, flags, have you spoken to this person, have you not? It then exposes a way to be able to set those things, and then it manages writing to the save file completely by itself. The saving that I sort of figured out was that actually you can wrap like an entire quest line into just like one integer value in the save file, which means that you don't have to overcomplicate the save file, and you can just save a lot more space. So when you go to create a new quest, what you'd actually just do is override the quest object, and then in the constructor, register a bunch of these different values. And then the thing is that they're all like ID'd, so you can just like get the value or set the value really efficiently. So this was the first quest I implemented with this system. It was very straightforward, like intentionally, of course. So the idea was that you went and talked to someone in the town, and they gave you some money because they thought that you were their grandchild or something. So from there, you have two options. You can either keep the money, or you can find the person who the money was actually meant for. And if you go and give the money to the person who it was meant for, then essentially you get a better item than if you just kept the money. But if you want to be greedy, you can do that too. So with that logic in place, the thing that had to be done next was actually implement the dialogue system. Now the good news was that I already had a dialogue system implemented in the engine, and I'd already used it as part of this project before. It was a thing that I put there probably like 4 years ago, so it's kind of old, but it was a thing completely of my own design. The system worked quite well from the experimentation I did. So the way it works is that the XML file is broken down into these blocks. So you would start on like a defined target block, and you would continually execute through it until the dialogue system eventually comes across like the end of execution. So let's have a look at how this thing actually works. So if this is meant to be the old man, it doesn't actually give you any like description of who's who, but so you see it starts to walk through the dialogue. Hey, I remember you. So yeah, you can either just give me the money. So this important tag ends up coming out looking like this, so it's just colored. So again, this is meant to be like a hint to the player that they can actually just find this person and return it, because I would hate for the wrong person to get it. Wrenching at my heartstrings. So it's not this guy, you just test some rich text. Nice. But if you talk to this person, oh look, it's Peter. Hope you're having a good day. Thank you, I am. Now, if you hadn't received the money from the old man, let's just do an example of that. If you have an example of that, then it just says, this is a nice town, yeah. But if you have gone back and actually claimed the money from the man, like this, then you get the option. The way I'm doing this is probably not ideal because you can see I've got some duplicated text here, which you really don't want in software. Maybe I'll find a better way around this, but this is how it works for now. So if you just say that, then he says, oh yeah, thank you for giving it to me. And also, I've got this ancient sword that you might want. And you receive simple sword. There we go. So look, you got a sword and you also lost your 100 coins. And if you were to go back to the old geezer here, then he doesn't give you any more money because the quest system is aware that the player's already had all the stuff that they can get from it. So yeah. That's the first quest. So this is where the old man talks to you. So the first thing it would do, you could just have a piece of text like this and it would just read that out. But what I'm instead doing is I've got a switch block. So this is just like a switch statement. So this is the quest name and then the money claimed flag, which is just defined here. So it's checking to see if that money claimed flag is true. And then it will jump to a different block depending on that. So if it is true, then it will jump to block 10. And if it's not, then it will just not do anything in the switch case and it will jump to block 1. Now block 1 happens to be like the initial chat with the old man who eventually just ends up giving you some money. And then you can see what it does is it goes to block 1 and then you get options. So don't know, yeah, give me the give me the money. And then it jumps to different blocks depending on that. So block 2 will just give you these different results, but they all go to block 4, right? Standard multi-choice video game. So give player money would call this one. So it does things like show the pop-up so you have some information about what you're doing and then actually just gives the player the money in their inventory. And the same, this just goes off and sets the quest value. So then suddenly money claimed becomes true. And when money claimed is true, then the old man just says this. So he doesn't start giving you any more money after the fact. I've got a similar thing set up for this character who's called Peter, which is, if anyone in my audience is called Peter, I'm very sorry. So if the player has enough money, then they go to this one, and if not, it goes to that one. And once it reaches the end of this, the dialogue just ends because it has nowhere else to go. I did have to spend a lot of time during the development of that quest actually just implementing a lot of the logic. Like, I didn't have the switch statements, and I didn't have the ability to jump to a different block based on script return values. Which, you know, so that meant I couldn't do things like check for money or check for the inventory free slot or anything like that. So that was really the main feature that got implemented this month. And I think from now I just need to like start implementing it into like the finished game. So I made quite a big song and dance at the start of this video about how I managed to implement a lot smaller changes into the game. So let me tell you about them now. Firstly, and probably one of the most important ones, controller support is massively improved. You used to just not be able to do certain things with the controller, like navigate through menus or use the inventory or just a bunch of things. Like a lot of the gameplay was just completely off limits for controller. So in the case of the inventory, you can just like move around and highlight different things, which is pretty nice to be able to do. One other thing that I kind of had to bite the bullet on was that previously the way you would do things like visit places or exit through the gateway is by clicking on a little billboard that appeared when you walked up to that thing. Now the problem with that was that really only worked in the context of touch and mouse and keyboard. It didn't really make much sense for controller. There might have been a way to do it, but who knows. So what I've instead replaced that with is what I'm calling the action manager, which allows you to just define different actionable things. So say you wanted to walk up to a character, then you might have two options, which might be interact with their storefront if they're a shopkeeper, or just have a chat with them. And maybe when you have a chat, there might be an option in the dialogue that's like, take me to the shop. But if you want to go quick, then you can just press like the X button rather than the A button, that sort of thing. But you know, that means that you can finally do things like actually visit places when you just sat on the sofa with a controller playing the game, which is great because you didn't used to be able to do that before. There's a few more improvements to the editor tool. Firstly, the main thing is that you can define what I'm calling data points in the world. So a data point is essentially just like a position that then gets resolved to be like an anchor point to add some sort of content to the game. So each data point defines two separate values, and the idea is the implementation would then go off and figure out what those specific things mean. So say in the case of the inheritance quest before, if I want to stick those characters in the world, I would have firstly a script for the world which would know which data points to interpret to be which characters, and then in the map I would just be able to define like character with this ID goes here at this position, right? So that's how you're able to just stick stuff into the world. And it's also extremely generic, like this is how I'm defining where the player starts when they spawn in the world, just based on where the data point is. The player has a default attack even if they have no items equipped. Previously, when the player was getting attacked and they had their weapon there, they just like stand there and take it. I've also fixed a bunch of issues. So one was that the enemies didn't used to chase the player. That was due to a regression, and I've now got a test to check that that actually works, which is nice. I also fixed a bunch of platform issues, which is like, there's probably too many of them to explain here, but here's a list. One thing that came out of me trying to increase the stability, which had just completely exploded after a certain point, was that the engine is now able to dump logs to the disk rather than just to the terminal. So all logs are just written to a plain text log file, which is super useful. And what I also did was I updated my test runner tool, which is like the Python script that is able to like run all the tests individually, to copy the log from that into a specific directory, because that then allowed me to artifact it during the GitHub action, which means that then I can have like a lot more detail about where the test actually failed. Because for a long time I ended up scratching my head because I just wasn't getting enough like granular information from the test architecture about what had gone wrong. And I was dealing with issues that were like unique to GitHub Cloud and this sort of thing. So it's useful to have that, and to be honest, it's kind of, I've needed that for a while. Now, something that's really quite interesting that I've been like planning to do for a while was to incorporate support for something called Lottie animations into the engine itself. You might remember a little while ago I used to have this pop-up thing that would appear when you actually discovered a place, but a problem was that it bugged after a certain point and was causing the engine to crash. So what a Lottie animation is it's just like a vector format, you know, defines like mathematical squiggles, which can then get turned into an actual image, and it just sort of allows easy motion. If you ever use like Duolingo or something like that, like all the animations in that are done with Lottie animations, in that they're vector animations that just get resolved down to like an image on the screen. Obviously the downside is that you've then got to render it on the CPU, and I think I'm probably doing enough stuff on the CPU as it is right now. The thing is, I got as far as like implementing support into the engine. I haven't actually implemented anything into the game just yet, but that's something I plan to do in future. The main thing is that I'm going to bring back the discovered location pop-up animations by doing it in Lottie. Like, the real benefit of this is that I can use actual industry standard tools in order to implement actual animations. So you can use things like After Effects, or I think even Lottie has its own animation tool, like the project provides its own animation tool. So that's just really nice, and it means that I don't have to implement a lot of that stuff in code, because implementing animations in code is like a notorious nightmare. And speaking of like trying to properly formalize things, here's something that I think I need to mention. So this game currently, engine, like all the engine ecosystem scripts, and the procedural exploration game project itself is completely open source. Like, everything is fully open source, MIT license, which is like extremely permissive. You could take it and sell it if you wanted to. The thing is that as this game has kind of grown, I'm beginning to think more about intellectual property, like, you know, marketing it, what the name is going to be, and essentially I think one of my main goals is like, how do I make sure that the work I do is protected while also, you know, like fostering the creativity or whatever of the community. I want to strike that balance between it's like it's open and it's also like going to pay my bills, because realistically I do need to pay those bills. Nothing that is currently open source is going closed source, like nothing at all. What I'm instead doing is I'm gonna build onto like an extension of the procedural exploration game base that is then closed source. So that's going to be the thing that I own. That's where all the intellectual property is, like, you know, the models, the artwork, some of the storyline, that sort of thing is going to be like the closed source stuff that you know, is owned by me. Essentially, that's what I'm selling. A way to think of it, I would say, is something like Visual Studio Code, which has an open source component, but then what Microsoft do at some point is they take that open source component and then they have a bunch of scripts that sticks all the like Microsoft branding and like, you know, spyware and all that sort of thing into it to make it the complete Visual Studio Code project. So the idea is that procedural exploration game, the repo, is going to contain like all the technical groundwork, and like a splattering of content. Some enemies, some quests, some items, you know, that sort of thing. The actual content, the storyline, the thing that is going to be the thing that like I'm essentially selling to the community, is going to be farmed off to this other closed source repository. When I come to build it, I'm just going to clone that closed source repo, jam it into the procedural exploration game which is then going to have a bunch of logic to be able to like see like a separate plugin essentially, and know how to set that up. So that's the plan. So I've actually already started the implementation for this and just like testing out as I go. So what I did, I created this other closed source repository, and I've made the base able to understand like when the files are present. It knows just to call them, and then those files will go off and do whatever they need to do. So here's the example. Essentially, I've shown that I can modify the project without having to like proprietarify some of the procedural exploration game base. And that, viewers, brings me on to the final thing, which is my plan for next month. What I want to do is I want to focus on nothing but gameplay for like the next few months. I think the ethos is going to be that I'm just going to try and remain as agile as I possibly can. And I'm going to use a technique which people call dog fooding. That's not a joke. Essentially, I've got all these new scripts that allow me to just like hit a button on my Steam Deck and it'll download the latest build from GitHub and start playing it, which has been like really cool to have. But it also means that I've just been able to experiment with things a lot more. So here's an example. A little while ago, I was playing it on the Steam Deck and I was just feeling a bit annoyed that like I couldn't really see where anything was. You know, I didn't have that perspective of like what the world looks like. So I added this this option where if you press one of the I think the right stick in or something, it would do like a bird's eye view of the entire world. And as soon as I put that in, it's suddenly like, yeah, this is actually really nice. I like that a lot. And I figured that out by just playing through the game and thinking, well, what do I actually want in it? So I'm thinking I'm going to do like a whole month where I just do nothing but that. And it's going to be that sort of thing of just like the moment to moment. I want to focus a lot on story for this game because I think story is something that indie devs can like really capitalize on. But I've also kind of come to the realization that I think the gameplay entirely consists around the exploration around the overworld. So the overworld, even without a storyline, has to be fun. So that's one of the main like stipulations I'm going to make. It has to be fun just to play the overworld as it is. And just focus on experimenting with different things in the overworld, like gameplay flow, items, collectibles, enemy dynamic movements, that sort of thing. This, you know, I want to focus on these things hard in the next few months. Part of the reason I switched to doing monthly videos was because I was just constantly working on tech stuff and it made it quite difficult to make interesting videos out of that. I think if this new approach to development works quite well, then I think I'm just going to start like rattling out videos, and I might drop some of the production quality because personally I think you guys care more about the game development itself than me having to spend ages making sure all the sound effects fit well. So we'll see. Last time I promised weekly videos, that fell off because I'm sorry, but I'm one man. There's only so much time in the day, and yeah, it wasn't working. But anyway, here's the game on mobile. Wow. Don't know when the last time people probably saw that happening was, but yeah. There's this bug where if the voxels get too high, then you just get like a black hole in the world. And it crashed. Oops. So, to wrap up, thank you so much for watching, and I'm just going to get back to developing gameplay. Hey.